9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
Live
2,
from Spain.
1.
This is The Drive Home with Harry Waters.
Hello there, everybody. I can't seem to hear my own audio, which is quite distressing. So that's always fun. Let's check if I've got that there. How are we going?
Live from
Hello.
Spain.
Can you hear me, Hugh?
This is The Drive Home.
Hugh can
with
hear
Harry
me. Hugh's got a
Waters.
thumbs up. Can I hear you, Hugh?
I'm not sure. Can you hear me now or
I
not?
can't hear you, Hugh. That's Let's see what's going on here. Let's see if it's my headphones. Otherwise, I'm going to join through my phone at the same time.
You should be able to hear me now. I'm not sure.
Oh, I can hear
me?
you loud and clear.
Oh, so I
Soon as I
exist.
plug
Good. Okay.
There we go. Amazing. You do exist. We all exist.
Live
Good.
You
from
sound very
Spain.
high pitched.
This is The Drive Home with Harry
That's,
Waters.
the helium.
Yeah, it sounds like it's helium.
Tune in
Right,
live
what I'm going to do,
at TT Radio.
I'm going to mute myself. There we go. I suddenly sound better. Oh, I sound normal again. Well, that was a very interesting start to the show. Yeah, I can hear myself. Let's just check if it's this. No, it's not that. I don't know why I can hear myself. Love these tech. And call in over here. I'm going to call in over here. Oh, look at all that. How about now? Can you hear me, Hugh?
Yes, but there's a slight echo.
What is going on with my echo today? This is very, very strange. I'm going to leave and come back again.
Okay.
Just a moment. How about now? No, you can't hear me at all. Okay, brilliant. Well, this is great. Hello,
No, I can hear
now
you
there's
now.
an echo. And now?
Okay.
Yes, we could be heard.
I can hear you anyway.
Excellent news. Oh, well, that's good. You can hear me. There's no echo. That was probably the most stressful start I've ever had to a Teachers Talk radio show. I think I was
blame me.
over-prepared.
Just blame me.
I'm going to blame Hugh for that. I think I was over-prepared. I've had everything ready for about 40 minutes sitting here. We had a nice chat before we came on. And, suddenly, out of the blue, it was all feedbacky and not very friendly to me. So thank you very much for bearing with me, Hugh. Thank you very much for bearing with me, everybody everybody listening. An absolute pleasure. That was I'm certainly warm right now. I'm going to blame the sun that's beating down on me, and not the absolute embarrassment of doing 40 shows and that sort of thing still happening. We can blame technology. It's been a fun week since I last spoke to you all. And this week continues to get even funnerer. Yes, I just invented a new word. It gets even funnerer. There are so many more things to come. Starting today with an incredible guest that we have, Hugh Dellar, someone I've been a big fan of for about a decade or so now, but maybe not quite as much of a fan as my mum is. But we'll get to that very soon. We're gonna shoot off for the news. So stay where you are. We'll be back very, very shortly.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
Imagine a world where you were free to focus on sparking curiosity in your students and giving them access to the awe and wonder of learning. A world where you were supported to deliver a truly personalised education to help all your learners achieve their potential. No need to imagine it, because that's exactly what the Oxford Smart Curriculum Service delivers. Seamlessly integrating curriculum, resources, assessment, next steps and professional development, every component of Oxford Smart is connected and working to provide you with a uniquely coherent and responsive service that empowers you and your students with transformational effect. The Oxford Smart Curriculum Service. When everything connects, anything is possible.
Introducing Bulb. With evidence-based learning at the forefront of education, let Bulb digital portfolios help reshape your educational practice. Bulb helps teachers teach and learners learn. Bulb is an easy-to-use, fully accessible digital platform that captures students' digital learning assets in one place, allowing them to evidence their learning and reflect on their growth. Our dedicated team of education specialists are on hand to ensure that Bulb fits seamlessly into all of your teaching practices. Come take a look and get a free account at bulbapp.com.
If you're listening to this, then we know we share one thing in common: a passion for the type of outstanding education that every child deserves. That's what makes us the leading provider of specialist education and care. We need people like you to help us achieve even more. With us, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and be rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. We are Witherslack Group. If you'd like to find out more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers and be part of our future.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn.
In Wales, head teachers are optimistic that the new term beginning on Monday will be the most normal since 2019. School visits, leavers events, sports days, awards, fairs and shows are running for the first time since the pandemic began. New schools advice is due to be issued on Friday, May the 6th. Teaching unions, however, have warned that it is not business as usual and there is still a high risk of COVID disruption. Teaching Union UCAC summed up mixed feelings, saying, "Hopefully, with the weather improving, there will be more opportunities for schools to plan extracurricular activities. However, only time will tell if the infections will rise or not after the Easter break." Karen Brown, head teacher of Millbank Primary School in Cardiff, said, "We are not so worried about COVID now, but there were still plenty of cases last term, so we are continuing with good ventilation and hygiene. We are looking forward to things like sports days again. Our plan is to invite parents to that and to our first Year 6 leavers service for 2 years. We started trips last term, and Years 5 and 6 had an amazing time at Story Arms. We couldn't do that in the last 2 years." According to new research by the National Literacy Trust, parents spent less time reading, chatting and playing with their children during the pandemic. The Trust surveyed more than 1,500 parents with children under 5. Overall, the report found that fewer parents of young children engaged in home learning activities, reading, chatting, playing, singing or painting and drawing, in 2021 compared with 2019, despite spending more time in their home with their child due to the pandemic. Spokesperson Alison Tebbs said, "It was such a difficult time for people. There was less support for families, there was less socialisation happening, and beneficial activities like going to the park or library were often unable to take place. Reading with children and having conversations is vital for helping their brains develop. One of the reasons 2-year-olds act out is because they're trying to communicate feelings which they can't explain verbally. That's why you get tantrums. The more words they have and the more support they get when they communicate, the more in touch they will be with their emotions and with the wider world." This has been your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this term is known to be one of the hardest. When we're distracted and tired, it's easy to make a mistake and fall for a scam. There are loads of scams out there, but the use of subdomains to give a fake sense of security is one scam that a lot of people fall for. In the interest of keeping you, your family and your friends safe, over the next 2 episodes, I'm going to explain the fake bank message scam and how it can look so believable. First up, we need to discuss how data travels over the internet. If you explore an internet address, let's take Teachers Talk Radio as our example, https://www.ttradio.org. There are basically 4 parts. HTTPS, this is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, with the S standing for secure. Protocols are used for data transfer. The HTTP protocol allows the transmission of HTML or hypertext markup language from a web server to your computer. In basic terms, it lets a web page be requested and viewed. The confusion here is the secure version. Some believe that seeing a site is HTTPS and has a little padlock in the address bar means that you are protected. To some extent, this is true. However, the security certificate for a site simply encrypts or scrambles the transmission, so if it's intercepted, it can't be used. So yes, you are secure from interception, but if the owner of a website is dishonest, you're not safe from them. The next 3 parts are to do with where the web page resides, or the address. Like we need a postcode and house number, your computer needs to know where to look for the information you want. www is the World Wide Web, a huge network of interconnected networks. TT Radio is the name of the website, and .org is the top-level domain. Again, simplifying this, .org domains are kept in a kind of phone book that can be accessed by your internet service provider. So to find ttradio.org, .org tells you to look in the .org phone book for TT Radio and return where the website is for your browser to download it. Why don't you ask your pupils, family and friends what they believe the padlock and HTTPS means? You may be surprised at the answer you receive. Next time, we're going to look at how criminals use this misconception to gain your trust. As always, don't forget to check out the TT Radio 2022 Twitter feed. Tell us what you want to know about tech. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Gail. We are back, and we are here with an ELT superhero, Hugh Dellar. He is... I'm not going to describe too much about him because you've probably all heard of him already. You've probably used his books already by now. The founder of Lexical Lab, the author of very many books, including Outcomes and, of course, Roadmap, which I almost took him on a tea tour around Barcelona, but it was cancelled because of some pandemic that happened. I'm not sure if you remember it. But he is here. He is Hugh Dellar. Now, and before I do bring him in, I'm also going to say he is my mum's favourite ELT guy. She often refers to the story of back in, I think it was 2012, at the T-Cell Spain in Bilbao. Hugh was speaking here, but he was also going to other presentations and such. And she ended up sitting next to him, and he was her partner for something or another. And she was thoroughly impressed. And she even said she might be listening in tonight, which for my 40th show, I was quite impressed by that. So if you are listening, Mum, hello. Here he is. It's Hugh Dellar.
Thank you very much, Harry. And hello to your mum, if you're out there listening. I should just quickly add, I'm actually technically co-founder of Lexical Lab, along with
My
Andrew
apologies.
Walkley,
My apologies.
my writing partner. feel obliged to say that bit. Yeah, thank you for having me.
It is also true, and it is something that I was fully aware of. And I just completely ignored that fact. My apologies, Andrew, because you've been working together for a fair old while now, haven't you?
Yeah, as my wife will put it, we've been married for longer than me and her have. Yeah, we've been working together sort of 22 years now, really.
And how did you meet? Because there's obviously like synergy there. There's obviously a great connection. How
Yeah.
did that come about?
So I did my Delta in 1995, 1996. And when I was on the Delta, I actually met this Kiwi guy called Daryl Hocking. And we got on very well, and we were both very interested in the lexical approach. And Daryl was actually my first writing partner. So the very first ever innovations that came out was myself and Daryl. And Daryl then ended up moving back to New Zealand. And around this time, sort of 97, 98, I got a job at University of Westminster. And about a year later, Andrew got a job at University of Westminster. And we lived quite near each other in North London. And we both played football with students and sometimes went to the pub after work, etc. And from that, we kind of started talking. And Andrew mentioned that he'd been doing little bits of writing. And I sort of suddenly thought, oh, wait a minute, I might need a new writing partner if my old writing partner's gone back to New Zealand. And out of that, our writing relationship really sort of emerged. And where we kind of basically, I guess, developed and grew up as teachers and trainers and writers together during our time at Westminster.
And it has blossomed very much, the writing relationship. I was actually reading today on LinkedIn about collaborations and such, and they are obviously more common now. It's a lot easier to have a writing partner because you can be in New Zealand and you can be here, but you can have a shared folder on Canva or OneDrive or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's much easier now. So you don't necessarily
much easier than it was back then, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that there are still certain kind of dynamics involved in just having that kind of relationship in terms of really just sort of rating the other person and trusting their judgment, I think you need to be in a situation of kind of absolute trust with them where if they tell you that something's rubbish, it's probably rubbish and you need to take it seriously, and that they know you well enough to be able to sometimes tell you that something might be rubbish,
Exactly, and that's something that's different. That kind of level of like confidence in each other and in yourself to say that is something that isn't as easy to develop if you don't actually know somebody.
No, it's not. I think it's earned and learned over time. That
there's a lot of pussyfooting around if it's not, when you're collaborating with, I collaborated just very recently with an incredible materials writer, Silvina. You've probably seen her stuff on LinkedIn. But she was so polite in telling me the things that I'd done badly. And I was like, it's okay. It is rubbish. You could tell me that it's rubbish because she has an incredibly, wonderfully organized approach to the way she works. And her materials are incredible. I have more of a kind of, I'm an omelette kind of guy. I'm smashing eggs everywhere and chucking bits in here and then, I'll start over one part and then I'll finish it further down. And I make mistakes. I make plenty of mistakes. And she was incredibly polite with how she said, I'm sorry, but I think this maybe. And I was like, no, just it's fine. It's rubbish. It's all good. Just tell me that it's rubbish. And we work through that together in that way. But it's hard to find that kind of, in Spanish we say confianza, like the trust within each other. So
yeah.
It's lovely to be able to have that, and I hope to find more people. But I think 20-something years with somebody must be brilliant.
Yeah, and I guess you get to a stage where you don't really want to work with anyone else, and that's kind of been an issue a couple of times in relationships we've had with publishers where it's been suggested that we team up with other writers, and we've sort of both just put our foot down and said not really interested in doing that. happy to work in projects that other writers are involved in on other levels, but if we're going to write with someone, we'll be writing together. Thank you very much. Or not at all. It's up to you, So yeah, I guess you go, maybe that's a weakness as well. I don't know, but it's always felt like a strength to me, and I've always felt like I wouldn't have been able to do what I have done without having sort of, I don't know, Andrew to bounce ideas off and to develop and build on any sort of bits and pieces that I come up with.
Exactly. Vanessa said that she loves working with me. Which is lovely. I love working with Vanessa as well. In fact, we're going to be working together at a mindfulness summer camp in Rome this summer, which is going to be amazing.
Okay.
Because we work
Good.
together as trainers for Pearson and BBC Live classes, but we've never seen each other. Like, this is one of those things we've never seen each other. So hopefully she'll have the confidence to tell me that my work is rubbish. I'm sure she will.
You're just giving everyone a green light here, Harry, just to sort of stick the knife in. So,
I hope so. I hope they do. I hope they do. I've got a fairly thick skin, so it should be okay.
It's important.
It really is. Now, you mentioned very briefly that you were interested in the lexical approach.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell our listeners who aren't aware of what the lexical approach is, what is the lexical approach?
So I guess it's in a way it's quite a subjective question, because I think, like any kind of approach or, I don't know, buzzword or piece of terminology within English language teaching, it's going to mean different things to different people. And on a kind of basic level, I guess, the lexical approach is a book that was written by Michael Lewis in 1993. And I guess when people talk about the lexical approach, what they mean is approaches to writing, teaching, training, materials development, and so on, which are influenced by the insights contained within that book and other, I guess, literature and thinkers who fall within that kind of tradition. I guess what it means to me is, first and foremost, it's an approach to language. It's a way of thinking about language that sees grammar and words as maybe much more interconnected than perhaps we've previously thought of them. It's a way of thinking about language that sees language very much as frequently existing beyond the single word level. So it means recognizing the importance of collocations, chunks, little blocks of language, fixed phrases, kind of what Michael calls institutionalized sentences or socially sanctioned sentences, which are like just normal ways of saying things. I had an example this morning. I was teaching, and one of the things I ended up teaching was, sorry, that came out wrong, because one of my students said something and she didn't know that expression, and she basically took the long-winded way of saying it, which was, oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't planned to express that idea in that particular way, and after I said it, and it's like, yeah, it came out wrong. And you could see that kind of like, oh, is that how you say that? So simple. And it's just recognizing that a lot of language and a lot of linguistic fluency relies on accumulating a stock of that kind of stuff. And I guess it's then thinking about, if you accept that and if you believe that to be true, what implications does that have for all manner of different classroom practices and classroom materials? So I guess what I took initially from the Michael Lewis book, The Lexical Approach, was this way of thinking about language which resonated with me and which massively impacted the way I then went on to think about my own teaching and my own writing.
And it certainly has had an impact on it. That goes.
It has, yeah. It has.
I do like your 1 minute English, which is rarely a minute, but is often it's very very good.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful
See,
array of hats in there, I must say.
well, that all started because someone didn't realise that I was posting different videos every day before I started wearing hats. And there was just like 4 or 5 little thumbnails of me probably wearing the same T-shirt, looking at the camera. And they're like, oh, I didn't realise they were different videos, at which point I realised I needed some sort of differentiating gimmick, which is where the hats came in. But I do like a good hat as well.
I've got 3 or 4 hats. I'm a big fan of hats. It's getting a bit warm to be wearing this cap, but I think my main differentiator is probably my shirts, to be honest.
Okay.
Although I did have like quite a big error back on a project I was working on last summer when 4 videos in a row came out with me wearing the same shirt. Although they had all been
Yeah.
filmed. Like in one of them, I wasn't bald, and in one of them, I was bald. Like, but I had the same shirt on, like in these 2 different things. So
The great unwashed.
well, that's it. I work online now. I can save water. I can save electricity. It's unnecessary to waste all of that on But let's save the environment. Let's wash less. Anyway, away from my personal hygiene issues because that's not what we're here to discuss. Yeah, the lexical approach and chunks is something you mentioned, something Vanessa mentioned in the chat as well. So vital in my opinion to when we're learning and when we're trying to express ideas. I have another friend who refers to something he calls the eagle method, which is to hone in on a phrase and you attack it like you're an eagle and it's your prey. And I was like, so you mean the lexical approach? And he's like, no, it's the eagle method. I was like, yeah, but you're kind of looking for the language within the language, and and stepping away from this idea of, I don't know, 10 vocabulary words and
Yeah,
the present
exactly.
simple.
Exactly.
So we're going to do daily routine and the present simple because that's what goes together and that's how we need to teach it and that's how it's been.
Yeah.
That's how it's been done forever. That's how we've always done it. That idea, for me, I can see how it works for some students because it is how it's always been done. It's the way they used to, but it helps you pass your school exams, but it won't particularly help you with your, I don't know, your Cambridge exam, your Trinity exam.
It won't get you through FCE.
Exam. It won't get you through FCE. It won't get you through life.
Yes. Which is a far more important consideration in the long term.
Exactly. Like the idea of being able to communicate, it's much more important that you can use these chunks. You can recognize these different, familiar phrases. And again, I think people fall into this. They then go to, okay, let's teach idioms, and it's like some of it is idioms. But when people fall into that, they go straight to it's raining cats and dogs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a common kind of knee-jerk reaction to thinking about sort of teaching multi-word items. Most people's grasp of what multi-word items mean is basically idioms, and a lot of people's understanding of what idiomatic language is shaped by the kind of stuff you find in course books. I don't know if you know that book, Idioms Organizer. It's a lovely book by John Wright. And what's really nice about it is they basically have things like, they'll take a unit on surprise, and they have things like, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a real turn up for the books. It was a blessing in disguise. I got the shock of my life. If he thinks that blah, 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 he's got another think coming. And, some of that is obviously more stereotypically idiomatic than other bits. But just recognizing that things like I couldn't believe my eyes are also kind of idiomatic and used in a fixed chunk-like kind of way, I think is really, really important. And I mean, that's one of the best books I've seen that covers that kind of language, because it complicates your understanding of what we mean by idiomaticity,
Yeah. I used to have, like, when I was, when I just got to Spain, I was a big fan of idioms, and I would have an idiom of the week as, my starter in the class, as you do.
Yeah. We've all been there.
I had a student go to his FCE exam, and when, like, he came in Spain, they're obsessed with studying, and he said, I didn't know what to study last night, so I stayed up studying all of the idioms that we did, and I think I got most of them into the writing. I was like,
no.
excellent. You wrote you had a
Yeah.
whale of a time, and it was raining. I was just like, that's not
How it
what the idea
works.
of that was. It was basically the idea of idiom of the week was it was a warmer. It was something fun to do while people were arriving late. It was something that wasn't connected to the class per se. So if they wanted to use it, maybe they could. But yeah, it obviously didn't. I did a
And
bad
I
job in
think,
that.
we've all been there. I think it's also just recognizing that certain kinds of, I don't know, fields of conversation or areas are maybe more likely to contain more of that language. So, of course you can, yeah. Excuse me, sorry, that's my son interrupting me.
No worries.
There you go, mister. Yeah. I think it's also just recognizing certain areas are maybe more likely to contain a larger degree of more predictable kinds of idioms. So if you've ever been sat in like an international business hotel somewhere and there are these scary people having like power breakfasts next to you, and you've got like the Swede, the Greek, the Argentinian, and the bloke from Morocco or whatever. And you often hear things like, yeah, well, we don't have a level playing field. And, Macmillan keep moving the goalposts. And that stuff is just very much part and parcel of high level international business communication. And so I think it's just, it's trying to really think about, if you're going to teach that stuff, that's great. And it's also recognizing that there's lots of other areas of language which are sort of multi-word but not necessarily idiomatic in that kind of way. So it's just things like, it was great to get away from it all. I mean, it's a very common kind of multi-word unit that's not really an idiom, or stop it, you're putting me to shame. Those kind of things are so much part and parcel, particularly of spoken fluency, I think.
Yeah.
But they're often very undertaught because they kind of fall into this grey area of, they're not really words, they're not really phrasal verbs, they're not really idioms. What section do we put them in the? And I think the way that course books still present and process language is very much based around word frequency of individual items. It's based around things like the Cambridge EVP, the English vocab profile, which is generally based around single words and the kind of, the frequency and surrender value of single words. So there are all kinds of issues that stop that stuff appearing as much as maybe it should in course books and in classroom material. So I guess a lot of it then has to come from teachers and working from what students are saying, listening to them, understanding them, and saying, yeah, I know what you mean. You mean it came out wrong.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing a lot of the time.
I think one of the things that you've really hit the nail on the head with. Oh, there we go. Using an idiom.
Look at that!
Wow. you really, because they don't
just can't help yourself.
No, I can't. God, I just couldn't resist. And I don't fall into any like specific category. And what course books want are things in specific categories. I remember teaching proficiency, and getting to the subjunctive section and just being like, what?
I know.
Subjunctive in English? What do you mean the subject? Like, why are we classifying? And there's stuff in there like "be that as it may," and I was like, but that's
it's just a
why
phrase,
would we
isn't
teach
it?
that as the subjunctive? That's just like a chunk of language that we use, which is very useful. It's something that it's a really good thing to use. Be that as it may, it's great. And there was, truth be told, as well. And I was like, why have they got a whole section on the subjunctive? And I was like, I don't understand the subjunctive. Me there trying to teach this to.
I'm not sure. I'm still not sure I understand it after like 30 years of teaching. It's just like
no, and it felt like they were just shoehorning in as many different phrases as they could. They were like, "What can we find?" There you go. Whereas what would make more sense would just be, I don't know, some useful phrases. Let's just do a unit on some useful. If you have to do the subjunctive, just call it some useful phrases and put some things in there. It doesn't always have to have the grammar behind it.
It's a constant battle with publishers as well to try to get them to think about things in a slightly different way. So often what they will want is not only like a lexical set, but within that lexical set, they will want all of the words you focus on, for example, to be verbs, or all of the words you focus on to be adjectives. And a lot of the time, what you need to do, I mean, I've just finished writing this thing today for a pre-int book about online problems. And the keywords are sometimes verbs, sometimes adjectives, sometimes nouns. So you've got things like, there's a lot of noise, your end. Okay, I'm going to put you on silent. And the way the publishers will want you to think about that is silent is the key word because that's B1 level according to the EVP. And so a lot of the time it's just kind of working out ways of including the phrases or the sentences or the typical ways of expressing things that you want to say in the material, whilst also trying to give the publishers what they think they want or need by highlighting certain words within it and saying, these are the words that we're actually really teaching here. And I guess for some teachers, they think, okay, what I'm teaching here is silent. Whereas I guess for me, what I think I'm doing is I'm just going to put you on silent.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's trying to keep everyone happy within what the material's providing for them, which can be a pain in the neck sometimes, to be honest. But hey,
it is what it is. So yeah, it's usually the way I see these kind of phrases and chunks, the way they're dealt with in course books is often like a word spot or language box or so they have like phrase of the unit, and it's just got a little box in the corner where it kind of has it highlighted there, which is a way of getting it in. Fair enough.
It is, but it should be more omnipresent, I think, than that personally. I mean, it should be basically the way things are done all the time, and a lot of the time, I mean, when you look at things like, I don't know, English file, which is sort of omnipresent, particularly if you're in Spain, say, still omnipresent. Basically, the way it deals with vocab is single words matched to meanings. And because of the success of those kinds of books, it creates a kind of expectation or like you were saying, a desire to keep things as they have always been in the classroom. And when you start to kind of challenge or question that, it unsettles some people, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the advent of the internet, basically, is we're not so heavily reliant on course books anymore. Don't get me wrong, I love a good course book.
I hear you.
But the fact is, like, now teachers can go out there and they can find other materials. They can look at, there are other places where they can get their materials from, like evolving things where they can grab something new, something that's relevant to that moment. Because one of the biggest issues with course books is they become irrelevant too quickly. The world is an ever-changing place. Often the language is relevant, but maybe the content isn't necessarily relevant. I remember teaching about David Beckham at Real Madrid long after he'd retired. Just like
I think any kind of course book material that relies on celebrities or particular time-bound news stories, etc., you're setting yourself up for a fall, essentially. It's a dangerous approach to do. And I mean, just anything that relies on celebrities, full stop. For me, I look at that and I think those are writers who haven't taught loads of Chinese students or loads of students from the Muslim world, because you teach students from those areas and they're like, we don't care. We're not learning English because we have any interest in your celebrity culture. We're learning English to kind of be able to be ourselves and to do what we need to do in the language. And I think that's a very kind of Western centric, Eurocentric way of thinking about the language and about culture. And I mean, just personally, I mean, in the 90s, when I first started teaching, I was using things like Headway, and Headway had this very kind of southern middle class, white kind of British tourist board view of England. And I didn't feel like it represented my own experience of the country, let alone, other people's experience of being part of the English-speaking world in its wider sense. And so I think yeah, you've got to be very careful with all of those things. And you know, but that's partly what drove me as a writer, and I guess what drove Andrew as a writer was a sort of desire to represent a wider view of the culture and the language and the way things work. And so I totally get if teachers out there, you know, kind of move away from course books and want to find other material that they feel represents a kind of, you know, a reality which is maybe more meaningful for their own students, because that's kind of what's driven me as a writer to get to where I'm at.
Well, exactly,
You
and
know,
you do still teach as well, which
yeah,
as you
yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
before, which I think
yeah,
is really
yeah.
important for writers to
Every
kind of
bleeding
stay.
day,
You teach every day?
5 days a week. Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
wow, that's
yeah. Still, even when I'm
hats
writing.
off to you. You
Yeah.
know, I've literally just taken my hat off. Well, I tipped my cap actually. I didn't take it off.
I'll take that.
That's impressive. I have now 4 permanent classes,
Okay.
and then some rotating classes that kind of come. I have 8, so I have my 4 classes a week, but then I also have my 8 classes a month.
Okay.
So yeah, not every day, but I think it's so important that as writers, as trainers, you know, we continue to teach. You know, it's
Yeah.
something. It's something. If we leave that behind completely, then surely we will soon become irrelevant as well if we aren't
Yeah.
in touch with our students.
Yeah.
Now,
And you can see it. You can see it in I don't know, certain speakers on the ELT circuit who clearly haven't been in a classroom for quite some time, other than perhaps as a sort of you know, fated guest of some kind who sits in the corner. And I think when you get to that stage, you kind of lose the right to really talk about the profession in a way. You know, I mean, I hope when I'm at that stage, people will just take me out the back and do the kind thing, you know, like
you're done. You're not relevant anymore.
you know, take you to the knackers yard and be done with it. Basically, it's you'd hope you'd have friends who would point that out to you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I completely see what you mean. Now, I was actually speaking to a friend. I do have a couple. Um, so it says here, yeah, people who can't. Vanessa said people who can't use Zoom shows that they haven't taught for a while.
Indeed,
Obviously,
yeah.
one of the big signs. Now, I have a friend. That's not an announcement. It's just a fact. And he is a big fan of the lexical approach, and he teaches in a private school here, where they have 2 hours of English a day, and the students are brilliant, and the students do really, really well. But his question was, would the lexical approach work as well if students weren't as immersed in the language? So if they were coming in and having maybe an hour or 2 hours a week, would it work as well?
Yeah, because I mean, in a way, as with anything in teaching, it's about asking what your alternatives are. Okay. And the way I would look at that is if you say you're doing 2 hours a week, okay, and I don't know, whatever level those students are, in those 2 hours a week, you're basically looking to help them get better at a particular kind of conversation, or help them talk and listen and read more about a particular kind of topic. Okay. If that's what you want to achieve and that's what you're setting out as your goal for the week, so your goal might be something like, you know, by the end of this week, my students are going to be better able to talk about online learning and problems they might encounter when studying online. Well, if you're just teaching, I don't know, imperatives and 10 single words, well, how does that help them have those conversations? What do they do with that? So at the end of the lesson, they can kind of go switch, press, restart,
Silence.
you know, basically a silence, you know, stop, start. It doesn't take you very far. And if you want to think about how those things operate in conversation, you basically have to think about how words interact with other words and how words interact with grammar, which is in essence a kind of lexical way of thinking about language. And it doesn't mean that I expect everybody will be able to reproduce all of that stuff immediately after encountering it in the classroom, but it does increase the likelihood of them being able to, and it does represent the language as the language is realistically used. and it does mean that the classroom experience of the language is more likely to mirror any experience of the language that they may have outside of the classroom, thanks to the glories of the internet and so on. And you still cover imperatives and, words like switch or press or whatever, or click, but you do so in a more meaningful kind of, I don't know, holistic kind of global way. That allows you to cover that stuff plus. And I think then it's just what your expectations about what the plus will lead to are, really. And I guess my expectation is whatever happens in those classes, you'll get at least what you would have got just doing a grammar point and some single words, at least.
I think what I really
And,
like,
and it kind of it. Sorry, go on, Harry.
I was going to say, I think what I really like from what you said there. Now, when people talk about the lexical approach, other people think, so you don't teach grammar. It's like, well, it's what I loved is how it reacts with grammar. Not just it's grammar. It's vocabulary and grammar. It's the way they react together, and that's like I really like that.
Yeah. And I mean, in a way, I guess it's also just thinking about how kind of omnipresent grammar is. I'm doing this talk at IATEFL in Belfast next month called What's Grammar Really For? Rethinking Our Priorities. And it's basically, the kind of nutshell summary is the main reason we should really be teaching grammar is to help our students use the words they're learning and to help them say what they want to say. And when you start looking at language and thinking about language in those terms, what you realize a lot of the time is we don't use a huge amount of grammar that often in everyday speech. So a lot of what you do is basically present simple, past simple, present perfect simple, going to, will, stuff that you've basically covered by the end of an elementary course. The issue then is knowing how to use it in certain contexts with certain bits of vocabulary. So, you can study, will as much as you want, but in order to say something like, well, we'll all need to tighten our belts a bit over the next few months, you need to learn tighten your belt, and you need to learn over the next few months. And the will part is basically the least problematic part of that sentence. That's the really, really easy bit. So it's basically just kind of looking at, your students need to see and encounter grammar repeatedly in meaningful contexts over time. But actually, the grammar they'll need isn't really that complicated. And a lot of the things that I think some students think make them advanced, like dramatic inversion, generally just make them sound daft. You get those students who say things like, never before have I read so interesting a book. And you're like, why are you talking like that? Because I'm advanced. It's like, it doesn't make you sound advanced.
Exam.
It just makes you sound like you don't understand how that particular bit of grammar works. And I think, students are kind of disappointed when they realize that actually in spoken English, what people really say is, no, it's a really interesting book. I really enjoyed it. And they're like, what's so simple? It's like, yeah. So the problem you've got is you don't know how to be simple because you're too busy showing off with your dramatic inversion.
Which would do you well in an exam because you'll get bonus points in an exam for it. But when I was an examiner, when I was an examiner myself, I was much more focused on people's
just how fluently they can express themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. It was
and almost kind of
it was a conversation,
and what they're saying a lot of the time as well. Yeah. And I think it's just that thing you were saying earlier about getting through life. A lot of the best conversations I've ever had with people have been with students who aren't particularly grammatically competent, but they're very keen to tell you something and to communicate their ideas. And those people will be fine in life, basically, because they're communicators and they're engaging and they've got something they wanted to say and something they wanted to talk about. And I think ultimately that goes a lot further than sitting there stressing, worrying about whether or not you should use the present perfect simple or the present perfect continuous.
If I ever see another will versus going to in my life, I've never understood this versus, present simple versus present continuous. Why
I
is there
know.
a competition there? Why?
I know.
This isn't Arsenal, Man
Yeah.
United. This is
Yeah, Cobra versus Mongoose.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So why are Will and Going To fighting? They're virtually interchangeable.
A
They
lot of the
are
time, yeah,
interchangeable.
a
Like
lot of the
there are
time.
very few occasions when maybe it doesn't work, but there
Well,
are not a strict set of rules.
particularly when you're doing things like predictions. It'll rain
Yeah,
later. It's going to rain later. It's going to
yeah.
be nice this weekend. It'll be nice this weekend. They're going to win. They'll win. They're never going to win. They won't win. All of those kind of contexts, absolutely pointless, wasting time thinking about them.
Well, exactly. Oh, but is this a prediction based on evidence? Can you see the clouds right now? So is it going to? Doesn't matter.
Well,
It doesn't matter. And so many course books have wasted so much time on it. And again, that won't help you pass any
yeah,
exam, and it won't
yeah,
help you in real life. Like
yeah. No, I know. And I
they're
think
two
as
issues.
as teachers, it's just recognizing. It's. I don't know if you ever saw that book we wrote. We did this little book called "Grammar Nonsense and What to Do About It,"
I have
which
seen
is
it.
about exactly this kind of thing, and it's basically things that we learned the hard way as teachers and writers, and just kind of thought, well, why are we spending precious time doing this insane nonsense? There must be a better way of thinking about this. And I guess the thing you said about grammar, I mean, for me, I think I teach grammar much better than I used to when I was teaching grammar in a more traditional way and in the way that I've been trained to teach it. Because I think actually what I was doing in a lot of those lessons is misrepresenting the way that language works and the way that language is used. And, when you do a whole lesson where you're only looking at, say, the second conditional, you're storing up problems for students because one, you end up creating weird contexts. So you spend an hour going around the room saying, what would you do if you won $1 million? I would buy a house. Good. Where would your house be? My house would be on top of a mountain. Good. What kind of car would you buy if you bought a car? You do this kind of nonsense like this. And that's all set up to kind of force the structure into students' heads. But then outside of the classroom, they're never going to have a conversation where they're only asked and answering things in the second conditional. What they're much more likely to need to do is say something like, hey, are you coming to the party tomorrow? No, I'd love to, but I can't. I've got to work. Oh, I would if I wasn't working, but sorry, not this time, maybe next time. And you can't learn that if you're only doing a lesson which is focused on the second conditional. What you need to do is to kind of maybe do a little bit where you look at making excuses, and within that you might include a couple of second conditionals. And so it's just kind of thinking about grammar much more in terms of what is it we use the language to do, and how does the second conditional interact with other things? How does the present continuous interact with other things? How do things interact with each other in normal everyday use? And that kind of traditional PPP based way of thinking about grammar and presenting language and getting students to practice language doesn't take any of that into consideration. So I would argue that I'm kind of teaching grammar better than I used to, because I'm thinking much more about how language is really used these days.
And also, in your situation, I imagine your learners aren't. It's not a monolingual class, is it? When you're
No,
teaching,
very,
you have.
very rarely these days. Yeah,
So
very
it's
rarely.
like with a lot of my classes, I can relate whatever grammar we're speaking about to Spanish because
Yeah,
my
okay.
learners are Spanish. So
Yeah,
I can use grammar in that way and say, well, if we're doing a comparative, I can say, look, it's more or less the same in Spanish, and they have that
yeah,
connection.
yeah. Which
So
is
you can
great.
kind of
I think
call on that.
it's
It's
a
a
power
useful
you've got.
tool. Exactly.
How long have you been in Spain, Harry?
I have been here now for almost 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good chunk. And so
Yeah.
you've got that kind of talent that a lot of people who are kind of L2 speakers of English, and they're teaching English, and they're often teaching students who share the same first language as them, have that kind of innate sort of superpower, I think of it as, to be able to relate L1 to L2 in a constructive and fruitful way, and to maybe guide students thinking about how the two languages relate and interact. And
Exactly.
I guess you've come at that the other route by being an L1 speaker of English who's learned Spanish as an L2, and then can acquire some of that kind of, superpower and can use that yourself. So more power to you.
Absolutely that. And speaking of power, I'm going to shift away from the lexical approach and
Okay.
swerve into power.
Okay.
I mentioned the power in the union earlier, and what you've just said there has really it's something that struck a chord with me many years ago, when I was applying for jobs, and it had this whole, only native speakers were allowed to apply for it. For a start,
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of that phrase anyway, because
Yeah.
everybody is a native speaker.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
of whatever language
Yeah.
they have.
Yeah, as
We're
you'll
all
have noticed,
teachers.
I'm trying to shift to L1 speaker and L2 speaker of English, and
Exactly.
but even that's a sort of, it's an inadequate tool,
Well,
but
exactly.
it's
We're,
maybe
we're all English teachers, and you're
yeah,
fairly
yeah,
outspoken in this quest for equality, I
yeah,
guess,
yeah.
in terms of
Let's
teachers,
call it that.
because it really is. As you mentioned there, from acquiring Spanish, from learning Spanish, it does feel like a bit of a superpower, and I look
Yeah,
on with awe at other teachers, other Spanish teachers teaching English, and I'm fascinated by their approach, and you know, I'm not saying they're all better teachers than your typical
sure,
backpacker who's been
sure,
taught,
sure, sure, sure.
but they have that empathy that
Yeah,
a lot of teachers don't have. A lot
yeah,
of English teachers don't have any second language, so they don't have
yeah,
the empathy of learning the language, and they don't have that connection with the language.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I guess my own interest in all of this was quite slow to develop, because I think when I first started teaching, um, I didn't really meet many, L2 speaker teachers of English for a long time. So, well, maybe on my CELTA course there was one or two people, but I didn't really process them. It was like, yes, but they're going to go back and work in Poland or something, that they're from a different kind of universe to someone like me who's doing this to travel and see the world. And then my first overseas job, I was working in Indonesia, and I was working in a context where my boss only employed native speakers. Some of them literally just off the street backpackers who had no teaching qualifications whatsoever and no real interest in teaching. And the school sold itself as providing native speaker teachers to upper middle class Indonesians who wanted to be in a room with a native speaker. And I didn't really think about it. And it wasn't until I think I started writing and then traveling and meeting teachers, particularly in places like Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Czech Republic, Spain, Brazil. When you start meeting the local teachers who come from, having learned English themselves as a second language and becoming teachers, and you realize kind of just how incredibly fluent they are, and B, kind of how dedicated they are and how aware of what's going on in the field they are, all of those kind of things. And then watching some of them teach and talking to them and watching them present at conferences. And then you kind of realize there are still all these people out there advertising native speakers only. Often that means very particular kinds of native speakers. There's a kind of
Absolutely.
racialized element to all of that. There's a kind of class-based element to all of that. And I think also kind of coming from a non-public school background. I don't know if you can tell. But coming from a kind of just a state school background, like a normal kind of lower middle class, upper working class kind of background myself, I was very aware when I first got into publishing and then got onto the conference circuit, how even in the UK, still how kind of dominated that all is by people who've been to public schools and kind of elite educational institutions, and the sort of snobbery and prejudices that still exist around varieties of English, around accent, around diction, and rhetoric and all that kind of stuff. And kicking against that really, and just Andrew's from Birmingham, So he's got his own cross to bear on that front. And neither of us fit into that kind of sort of upper middle class Southern public school sort of background. And I guess that gives you a kind of empathy with outsiders and with people who don't fit into that either. And then just basically just a sense of fairness and justice and kind of thinking, well, this is bullshit. Like, why would someone off a CELTA course be offered 3 times the price that a really good qualified teacher from Poland who's been teaching 10 years and is basically bilingual get? It doesn't make any sense. And then I think on top of all of that, especially in the last sort of 8-9 years, there's been a kind of Brexity, Trumpy kind of arrogance that some native speaker teachers come to the job with. And I see it when I'm arguing with people online where people get very touchy. People get very like, well, we all have freedom of choice. We're free to choose who we want. And it's like, well, legally, you're not free to choose who you want, actually. Legally, there are requirements on people advertising for teachers that need to be respected, because otherwise everyone would be free to say, well, I don't want a black teacher, I don't want a woman, I don't want a Muslim teacher, I don't want a gay teacher. And, that's not the way the law actually works. And so it's not about freedom of choice. There's also, I think, a lot of myths around what native speakers can do or bring to the classroom. And people are very touchy about, well, I can teach the accent. It's like, what? So your students sound like you, do they? Because I've been teaching 30 years and I've never had a student who sounded anything like me. Okay, I just haven't. I've had students
pick them up at 2 years old and teach them until they're 7. Like, there's a slim chance then they
bring
might
them
get
up
your
as your
accent.
child.
Exactly.
Maybe. And then there's all this kind of myths about, I can teach them the culture. It's like, what culture is that? What is the culture? Well, American culture, British culture. Which part of British culture do you teach them? Well, I can answer their questions about the culture. Well, what you can do is you can express your own cultural reality, okay? But that's not my cultural reality, and that's not going to be your cultural reality. And we've all got our own cultural realities. There is not one thing that we all possess and share and agree on that students need to have transmitted to them as part of their language teaching. And so I just think that there's a lot of I don't know, defensive bigotry still connected to people protecting their positions of power as native speakers. And in the end, I would like to be judged as a teacher not on the fact that I've got a passport that says I was born in England. I would like to be judged as a teacher on my teaching and on my ability to help students learn the language and on my empathy and my pedagogical competence. And I would like other teachers to be also judged on those things, not on where they were born. And I think I first heard it from Marek Kiczkowiak, who does the TEFL Equity Advocates thing. He had this lovely expression about good teachers are made, not born. And, it needs saying and it needs repeating. And you'd kind of imagine we're at a stage where we're past all of this, but we're clearly not. And I know Sylvana Richardson did her amazing IATEFL plenary a few years ago. And I think the tide is slowly turning. But I think it needs, as with anything, it's like in order to stop sexism, you need men to call out other men. In order to stop racism, you need white people to call out other white people. And in order to kind of stop native speakerism, you need native speakers, so-called, to call out native speakerism and to kind of challenge it, I think. And so, I've probably spent way too many hours of my life in arguments with very touchy, sensitive people who feel like I'm kind of taking away their privilege.
You're taking their sovereignty.
Yeah, basically, it's those angry, straight, white, middle-aged men kind of going, you can't even call yourself English anymore or you get arrested. It's that, be illegal to be a man soon. It's in a way, it's the kind of ELT version of that. And I think it's also then just, sorry to rant on about this, it's recognizing your own language learning experiences. And I know when I was learning Indonesian, I learned a lot of my Indonesian from other Western people who spoke Indonesian as a second language better than me, okay? And we used English to get to the Indonesian. So I would ask them in English, like, how do you say, can you stop here, please? And they'd tell me, and I'd learn that phrase. Or I'd hear them say something, and I was like, oh, what was that you just said? And we used English all the time to kind of decode or encode the Indonesian that I needed. And then later on, even with Indonesian friends, the people I communicated best with, or most often with, we often spoke both languages, and sometimes we'd switch in and out of the language, or sometimes I'd get stuck and I would say, I don't know how to say this bit in Indonesian, so I'm just going to say it in English. And they go, oh, yeah. You mean blah, blah, blah. And it was like, that's what I'm looking for. And that was all basically done through having access to bilingualism within the classroom, okay, or bilingualism within the learning process. And so when I hear people kind of say, well, if I was learning Chinese, I would want a native speaker. It's just a stupid way of looking at it. What you'd want is someone who spoke Chinese better than you, and probably someone who also spoke your first language. Because
and someone that can teach.
Always an added bonus. And so I just think it's good to challenge all of those myths and to maybe sometimes I'm a bit harsh in it. So I see people on kind of English teachers in Valencia kind of going, hi, I'm a native speaker looking for a job, and then I chip in kind of saying being a native speaker isn't a qualification, and people get really sensitive about it. It's like, why are you so horrible to people? It's not horrible. I'm just pointing out that it's not a qualification. That's all.
Exactly. I like to, when I see these adverts and such and these things, I just like to ask people if they are advertising for jobs, is there any way you could advertise your job without saying native speaker? Because guess what? You don't need one. Also, it's illegal. And
yeah, exactly.
Often people kind of just do it out of habit and they realise and they say, sorry, I didn't mean to. And, But yeah, there are those people who don't react particularly well to it now, and as you mentioned, I've found and I've discovered through learning another language, I did learn a lot from people who weren't native speakers of Spanish. I learned a lot from people who had learned Spanish and they'd originally been English speakers, and like further to that, with my experience teaching these BBC Live classes, I have met so many teachers from across the world, so many teachers, and I've been able to, have this kind of window into their life through Facebook or through Instagram or whatever, to see what they're doing, to see what they're teaching and how they're connecting with people. And it's absolutely incredible. Now, I'm going to take a quick moment to shoot off for the ads. We'll be back in a couple of minutes and we'll continue talking about this then. So thank you so much. We'll be back in just a moment.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
Imagine a world where you were free to focus on sparking curiosity in your students and giving them access to the awe and wonder of learning. A world where you were supported to deliver a truly personalised education to help all your learners achieve their potential. No need to imagine it, because that's exactly what the Oxford Smart Curriculum Service delivers. Seamlessly integrating curriculum, resources, assessment, next steps and professional development, every component of Oxford Smart is connected and working to provide you with a uniquely coherent and responsive service that empowers you and your students with transformational effect. The Oxford Smart Curriculum Service. When everything connects, anything is possible.
Introducing Bulb. With evidence-based learning at the forefront of education, let Bulb digital portfolios help reshape your educational practice. Bulb helps teachers teach and learners learn. Bulb is an easy-to-use, fully accessible digital platform that captures students' digital learning assets in one place, allowing them to evidence their learning and reflect on their growth. Our dedicated team of education specialists are on hand to ensure that Bulb fits seamlessly into all of your teaching practices. Come take a look and get a free account at bulbapp.com.
If you're listening to this, then we know we share one thing in common: a passion for the type of outstanding education that every child deserves. That's what makes us the leading provider of specialist education and care. We need people like you to help us achieve even more. With us, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and be rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. We are Witherslack Group. If you'd like to find out more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers and be part of our future.
We are back. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging around with us there. A pleasure to have you. And a pleasure to have Hugh as well. Something that was mentioned just at the end there of the ads, salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits, something ELT teachers often discuss in various platforms here, there, and everywhere. Now, the best salaries tend to come, and salaries and benefits tend to come from areas where they often advertise for only native teachers. We're talking in lots of parts of Asia and. So how can we, as ELT teachers and professionals, what can we do to ensure we get the best salaries and benefits, Hugh?
Join a union.
Join a union. There you go.
For first answer. It's a really good question, I think. And I think for a long time, a lot of teachers are kind of, it's Squid Game or it's Parasite or it's any of those other kind of Korean dramas about the way in which we're all basically encouraged to fight and kill each other in the scramble to get to the top of the pile, and be rewarded for that kind of activity. I think realistically, ELT is a very funny industry because a lot of the big schools and big chains, particularly in the UK, but also around the globe, are owned by very, very, very wealthy people. And, a lot of the chains in the UK, like EF and so on, are basically owned by billionaires, and they're owned by hedge funds. And those people don't become rich simply through their own hard work and genius. They become rich through the impoverishment and the immiseration of others a lot of the time. And you can try one of two things. I guess it's, what are your alternatives? Like I was saying earlier with the classroom. It's basically, you can go and ask for a raise. Well, good luck with that. You can look for another job in another place, which might offer you a bit more money. That can sometimes be a possible thing to do. Or you can kind of organize collectively, particularly kind of beyond your own institution. And I know in Spain, this is starting to happen. And here in the UK with the TEFL Workers Union, it's kind of starting to take off as well, where people are sort of recognizing that if you're only organizing within your own institution, you're obviously putting yourself at risk. Years ago, I used to work at a language school in London, which I won't name in case they're listening and are sensitive about people knowing these things. But it began with Saint in the name. And they were infamous because a whole bunch of teachers before I was there had got together and basically said to the boss, we demand a pay rise, and the boss had just got rid of them all and hired a whole load of new people who didn't know that they were being basically brought in as scabs. And the problem with organising within your institution is you don't have wider collective power, whereas if you're part of a kind of profession-wide union, which for EFL people hasn't really existed up until very recently, once you're part of a broader union and you've got a kind of collective bargaining power beyond your own institution, it helps you fight the kind of many injustices to which you will be subjected working particularly in the private language sector within EFL. It's still not a kind of cure-all, solve-all problem. I think beyond that, there's also just stuff like agitating for a better national living wage for everybody. I mean, here in the UK, there's kind of, there's what's on offer from the government. There's Keir Starmer's kind of lukewarm, we'll offer 50 pence more than that. And then there's the demands of a lot of people within the labour movement for a £15 an hour living wage. And it's also being involved in campaigns like that and recognising that, a lot of people in private language schools here are still earning like 12, 13 quid an hour, which is, a couple of quid above a national minimum wage. And it's not enough. It's not enough for people to make a career out of it. It's not enough for people to kind of put down roots, start families, do things normal people
Buy
might
a
want
house.
to do at some point. Just radical things like that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like when I was teaching in a school previously, and it was an improvement on the language academy I'd been working in, because the language academy was a 9-month contract that would, it ended in June, and then until September it was basically, good luck. Go
Yeah.
If you can find work, then great. If you can't, then unlucky. And having a daughter, I wasn't able to do what a lot of people do, is go back to the UK and teach in a summer camp over there. And then, so I went into a school, and it was great for me because I had a contract for a full year. Now, bear in mind, I'd been teaching for almost a decade before I got my first full contract of a full yearly contract.
Yeah.
10 years teaching under my belt until I'd got that. And then suddenly I realised that I was there, and I was working from sort of about 8:30 in the morning till 5 in the evening, and I was earning about €10, 15 an hour in the end, and I was ruined at the end of every day, because I was teaching up to 7 hours in a day, and I was like, I'm earning more than I did before, and I have a better contract, but I'm absolutely exhausted, and there's nothing I can do about it, because
and it's just unsustainable as well. It's like I don't know about you, but I'm not getting any younger, and it's like you can do that kind of thing when you're in your 20s and maybe in your early 30s, but then once you've got kids and you're just getting on a bit, it's much harder to maintain that kind of, I don't know, degree of intensity in your working life. And at the same time, I mean, it's stupid on the part of schools as well, because if what you're doing is driving out people who have a lot of experience and expertise in the field simply because they're so knackered that they can't continue to do what they're doing for the wages you're paying them, it's a stupid way of managing a workforce, basically. And it's a very short-sighted way of managing a work sort of space. I guess the other alternative that I know is starting to happen is people are setting up little kind of collectives and kind of co-ops and that kind of thing as language schools. And that's also a good idea, I think. But I basically don't think there's any real way of seeing meaningful systemic change without some kind of collective struggle and collective organizing. Otherwise it just becomes a kind of dog eat dog. Who can get the top job in the top academy? Well, that's great if you get it. What about everyone else who's also a great teacher?
But then in the summer, it doesn't even become who can get the top job. It's who can get the job. The one job available in the whole city to be able to earn
Squid
money.
Game. It so is. It's just... And, I guess also, yes, of course, everyone probably needs a side hustle. Everyone probably needs to think about other ways in which you might be able to bring in some extra money during the lean months. But I think if you are in a position where you can join a union and you can organise, you should do so. And if you're in a position where you've done well out of the profession, someone like me, you kind of have a moral obligation to be involved and give some time and energy over to things like, unions and organising and supporting people who are having problems. So one of the things I'm involved in is I do stuff for the TEFL Workers Union. And so I've helped to design a whole load of free material for them, which is on their website, which anyone can look at. It's the TEFL Workers Union site, and there's a section called Labour English, which is kind of business English lessons written from a worker's point of view, and particularly the kind of workers that you often teach if you're working in ELT in the UK or in Ireland or whatever, where you're dealing with people who are on 0 hours contracts, who are being dicked around at work, who might be subject to harassment, who don't know about unions, don't know about their legal rights. And it's kind of thinking about the world of work and the world of labour from their point of view, and writing lessons that are maybe more friendly for them, rather than the, you're going to negotiate £1 million deal with Microsoft.
With business English, there is so little working
and it's
English.
Yeah, exactly. And for a lot of people, it's like, I'm not going to negotiate £1 million deal with Microsoft. I'm going to do another 12-hour shift in the bloody burger joint. Even though in my country I'm an architect. It's just, that's the reality for lots of people. And so I think having material that reflects that is good. And being able to do something like that myself as a writer, and being able to just contribute that. And also kind of, take part in social media campaigns, and you kind of naming and shaming schools and all that kind of thing. Anything you can do, it'll take you 5-10 minutes out of your day every now and then to be involved in that stuff. And collectively, it just helps to empower us as a profession,
Absolutely. And I have to say, I've learned a lot from particularly the social media presence of the union, because there are things that I didn't know about, and I've seen it.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Whoa!
And you're like,
I'm going to go double check that just to make sure, because obviously, you still have to, have to fact check everything. As somebody who's involved in the kind of sustainability world, I'm used to fact checking a lot of stuff. And like, you go in and you just look at it, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that has just happened. Like, particularly in terms of sustainability, a lot of the things I've read that have been posted recently they've taken my breath away. And it's just like, oh my, there is such a high level of greenwashing going on there. And maybe some of it isn't even greenwashing. Like, there are some parts of it where there are materials being created that are going out to people across the world, and it's with the best intentions. But then obviously other branches of these Goliaths within the industry are off partnering with the Tory government, or they're off partnering with British Petroleum, and you're just thinking, I feel really bad for those people who are within those institutions that are trying to make this change, that are pushing these ideas forward to make get these sustainability things out there, while their boss is, behind their back, making deals with Shell or whatever. And it's just like, it's been incredibly eye-opening for me. So here we go. Vanessa's saying, would be great to name and shame bad, irresponsible teachers too. Yeah, for example, those who don't turn up to work. Giving us all a bad name, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yes. It's not my job to do that. And I may on occasion have possibly missed the odd day of work in my 20s because of my own recreational pursuits as
I don't believe it for a second.
A young, enthusiastic nightclubber, etc. So I'm not entirely innocent on that front myself, and so he who is without sin can cast the first stone, etc.
I've got a stone here.
Yeah, but are you without sin? Are you without sin, Harry?
I've got so much sin, Hugh. I've got so much. I've got bags of it. But I see what Vanessa means here. Now, Vanessa is a language school owner in Rome, an incredible language school, and she is a wonderful boss. I've spoken to a lot of her employees actually, and they're all treated very well. And there are places out there that do treat their staff very well and pay them fairly and provide them with work.
There are, and I guess rather than name and shame staff, I think maybe what's good to do is to do what you've just done, which is to kind of give some props to people who do things properly. I mean, you know, as a very small online language school ourselves with Lexical Lab, we have 2 employees, and we made a very conscious decision to pay them kind of well above the going rate and well above what they're earning anywhere else. And we pay for them to go to conferences if they want to, and training courses and that kind of thing. And you know, you do that with the staff that you've got, that you value, because you want to keep them and you want them to get better. And an investment in those staff members is also an investment in your own kind of future in that sense, you know. So yeah, you know, I think it's important to kind of give some props to those people and to
Yeah,
those schools. And well
Vanessa at
done,
the
Vanessa,
moment.
for what you're doing.
Oh, she's brilliant. She's doing a mindfulness course at the moment, actually. So that's and I'm joining in with that, which has been it's been really useful
This is
for
the one
me.
you were on about, yeah,
It is
yeah.
indeed. It is indeed. It's been really good for me because, going from kind of teaching, and then I was an ELT consultant for Pearson, into being freelance. I've found myself incredibly stressed quite often just because I've taken on too much or whatever. I've gone too far. So, being able to connect with Vanessa and being able to kind of just calm myself down a bit every now and again has been
Yeah,
very
yeah,
useful.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And yeah, like
yeah.
you say, it's so important to shout about those who do it wrong, and those
Yes.
who and name and shame those who do it wrong. But it's equally important to highlight those who do it right
Uh,
and make it
I don't know what the opposite of naming and shaming is. Is it just giving props to, giving a
naming
shout out to?
a shout out, yeah, celebrating.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to know that there are still good people out there doing good
yeah,
things.
yeah. No, there are.
There are quite a few, but there are also a lot of incredibly horrible, exploitative people out there, and it is important that they are named and shamed, and we know about these people, and we hear about them because nobody wants to
And
be in that situation.
and I guess, as Vanessa was hinting at, there are also people who are probably not cut out for a lifetime in teaching, and who maybe don't take their responsibilities to their employers and their students as seriously as perhaps they should. And, you know, at some point we'll need to either redress that particular kind of behavior or move on to some other area of life.
Exactly. Now,
Um,
I'm going to stick my neck out here and say, on many occasions, these will be L1 speakers of English.
almost certainly.
And they've gone off and they've thought, I'm going to travel the world,
Yeah,
and the only way I
yeah,
can do it is to be an English teacher. So I'm going to
yeah,
be an English teacher. It's
yeah,
exactly what I did, except I
yeah. It's what I
happened to
did too.
actually love what I was doing. And, I fell
You
into it.
know.
It's like, oh, I'm really, I like this a
Hmm.
lot. This is great.
Yeah. I
Um,
was also lucky in that I was able to function on 2 or 3 hours sleep when I was that age a lot of the time. So, you know,
yeah,
it's like you kind of
yeah,
grab
exactly
3 hours kit, brush your teeth, go in and teach, and you kind of get the energy from the classroom. But
exactly. But yeah, there are people who aren't. And again, that's
yeah,
very rarely going to be someone who's an L2 speaker of English,
yeah,
who's studied, gone to university, spent
yeah.
years training to be a teacher, and then they've gone into the job in that respect. So again, another reason for
I
equality.
a quick story on this front. Years ago, I used to work with this guy in Indonesia who was one of those native speakers, and I used to share a class next door to him on in the mornings. And one day I heard him stumble into class late, and I heard him kind of knock something over as he walked in, and then I heard this awful retching vomiting sound,
Oh
and
no.
I sort of thought I better just pop in and see what's going on. And I walked in, and he was holding up the kind of rubbish basket like this and wiping his chin. And he turned to this class of teenage Indonesians and said, "The verb you are looking for is to vomit. I shall write it on the board."
Oh
There you
my
go.
gosh. I've only twice vomited at work, never in the classroom. One of them I was genuinely very ill, and the other one was the day after my stag do, where I had to run out and use the bathroom. But I went into work the day after my stag do, which was maybe the biggest error that I made. I should probably have just taken that day off in advance. So, on that note, it's been wonderful. It's been lovely. I guess I'll see you in Belfast.
I hope so, Harry. Yeah. Come
I'm
find me,
arriving
come say hello.
on the Wednesday, so
Okay, I'm there for the duration. So
fantastic. I have a wedding ceremony to attend. Yeah, it's not mine, as you know, because I just told you that, But yeah, I have a wedding ceremony to attend on the Tuesday, so I'll be leaving on Wednesday.
okay. Well,
Hopefully, it won't be a
come say
horrible one.
hello, and well,
I will.
catch you there.
You
Yeah,
will
and
indeed.
thank you very
you so
much for inviting me on.
An
Lovely to
absolute
talk to you.
pleasure. It's been lovely. So thank you so much.
All righty.
Okay then. Now then, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be back next week. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for being here, Vanessa. Wonderful as always, and we'll speak to you soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.